So with the recent release of Pokemon Sword and Shield, and my sudden desire to do a Nuzlocke run, I figured it was a good time to share my thoughts on the world's most successful franchise. Like many people my age, I grew up with Pokemon dominating a significant amount of my childhood. I was a wee ankle biter of 8 years when the original show and Generation 1 games were released, and took to the franchise like a moth to a flame. It combined a lot of my favourite things at the time: interesting creatures, over-the-top fights, and adventures. It also kicked off my mild passion for trading card games when the Pokemon TCG was released. As you can imagine, I've spent much of my life with some serious nostalgia goggles for the early years of Pokemon. It's no secret that I rank the Generation 2 games up there with Spyro 2 as an example of a perfect sequel. I hold a lot of good memories of playing those original 6 games, from that one Nidoking that carried me through a playthrough of Yellow, to that level 140 Snorlax I picked up from the Missing No cheat and ported over to my copy of Gold. Alternatively, I was a young teen by the time Generation 3 was released, and the cold, clawed hand of cynicism and angst had gotten to me by then. I had to be one of the oldest cases of the first 2 generations were the best ones, which is ironic since my copy of Emerald ended up being one of my favourite saved games ever. I replayed my Red, Yellow, Gold and Crystal several times over the years, but I refused to redo Emerald. As much as I hated Onohoban region at the time, it spawned several of my favourite Pokemon to date. That is not to say I suddenly had no problems with the game, or even with the original games. There is plenty to nitpick or criticise within those games, from the objective fact that some Pokemon had basic as hell designs, to my subjective hatred of the need to surf across water to reach new areas. Good God, did I hate having to surf to places, and that only got worse with the waterlogged Hoenn map. Still, I mourn the loss of my copy of Emerald, which sadly died 7 years ago, taking my beloved Banette and Swampert with it. And then we got Generation 4. It held so much promise. I was so eager to play through and discover all the new Pokemon. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get into my copy of Pearl, dropping it after getting 3 badges. I managed to get much further in Platinum, but even that ended with me saving the game while standing on the beach, staring out at the ocean route towards Victory Road. I miss my Torterra dearly, but I haven't touched my Gen 4 games since then. That said, I enjoy them far more than Generation 5. 3 badges into Pokemon Black and I flat out stopped caring. I know this is the favourite generation for many fans, but I just wasn't into it. I didn't care for any of the new Pokemon until years later, and the straightforward circular design of the map was just woefully uninspired. I suppose we'll see if my current Nuzlocke run will lead to my shifting opinion on the Unova region. This brings me to the latest 2 sets of games, Generation 6 and 7. Personally, I was not expecting much out of either of these games, though I did get caught up in some of the hype for Gen 7 for a short while. Looking back, I'm sure I only got excited because I surprisingly enjoyed Gen 6. It was super easy in many regards, but it introduced some neat Pokemon and let me run through most of the game with freaking Beedrill for the first time in a long time. Granted, I still haven't finished playing my copy of Pokemon X, but I intend to get back to it one day. I can't say the same for Pokemon Moon though. I was excited for it, but good God did the weird pacing and the obnoxious amount of cutscenes drain all the fun out of that game. I also wasn't all that enthralled by the trials that replaced the classic Pokemon gyms. Push come to shove, I would say that is the second least enjoyable mainline Pokemon game I've played. Obviously, first place goes to Gen 5, for now. And now we have Generation 8, which has spent the last few months steeped in a mixture of hype and controversy. Personally, I'm too broke to afford a Nintendo Switch, let alone a copy of the new games. This means all of my knowledge of it is secondhand, and I'm not likely to get hands-on experience for a while, if ever. That said, I hope and expect that people who do play the games enjoy them and find new Pokemon to love. I can say that I really like Sobble's design and the super adorable Alcremie, but from what I've seen of others, I am far from impressed overall. At least the designs of the human characters are looking pretty good. And then there are the controversies. Oh, so many controversies. I'm sure if you Google or even YouTube search the phrase Pokemon Gen 8 controversy, you would get more than enough results to satisfy your curiosity. The biggest one being the removal of the National Dex, a post-game feature that allows players to collect every single Pokemon, and the outright lies given to excuse this removal. Game Freak claimed that one reason for removing over half of the existing Pokemon was simply that it would take way too long to create new 3D models for them all. That would sound perfectly reasonable, if it were true. However, it has come to light that the new games use the same 3D models from the Gen 7 games, which Game Freak themselves had officially stated were future-proofed back in the lead up to the release of Sun and Moon. So yeah, they lied, people are pissed, and for the first time ever, you can't catch them all. Combined with the many other subpar features in this game, ranging from a severe lack of battle animations to the seeming return to Gen 6's super easy difficulty curve, I think it is more than understandable why many players have been underwhelmed thus far. I mean, come on, the franchise's slogan is literally gotta catch 'em all. It's one of, if not the defining feature of the franchise, let alone the games, and they freaking took out the means to do just that. But I digress. If you're interested in learning more about the various controversies and issues with the latest games, I would personally recommend checking out Loxton's video over on Channel Noggin. I'll even give you a link to it below and up in the corner here. I don't think there are any problems severe enough to diminish the enjoyment you can have playing these games, even if once again my favourite ghosty Shuppet has gotten shafted. Back to Game Freak, however. Those bastards can take their bullshit and eat it. I've been critical of them for years, ever since I learned the reason they didn't keep certain features was because they wanted to make each generation stand out with a unique gimmick. Why create a feature only to use it once or twice and pull it out? If it was an unpopular or useless feature, like the secret bases of Gens 3 and 4, then that is fair. No need to keep something nobody wants. As for everything else, there is nothing to lose from keeping the better features they've come up with over the years. Keep adding them, expand the player's ability to explore and experience the world with each new iteration. I know they want to make each generation feel special, but a good idea becomes a wasted idea when it's 10 years and 2 games later and nobody's playing the older games, let alone using those features. Especially now that they are creating these games for a significantly more powerful system than they are used to, there is no reasonable excuse not to pile in more features. All they have to fall back on is their own stubbornness or laziness in the matter. Specifically, they really need to bring back the following features. The 4-part day-night cycle featured in Gen 2, the overworld use of the dive move from Gen 3, the underground and mining feature from Gen 4, though preferably at a much smaller scale. Giant empty tunnels to nowhere are boring, but the ability to physically go digging for fossils and items was pretty sweet. The seasons from Generation 5, the goddamn battle frontier from Gen 3, and finally, and most importantly, multiple regions from Gen 2. Seriously, Game Freak, there is so much potential left in Pokemon, but the way you've been going about things has you very much heading down the path of never fully exploring it. The players want an ocean, but you're clearly content to just give us puddles. Then again, you have a history of being incompetent when it comes to compressing and optimizing your games, like including duplicates of all character models in-game, one for each area the character appears in, instead of doing the smart thing and having a code that pulls required models out of a collected pool. Again, I would like to point to Loxton's video and the myriad of other videos you can easily find explaining this. It is honestly a wonder why the Pokemon Company even allows Game Freak to continue developing the mainline titles with such a problematic history. Thankfully, on a more positive note, all the spin-off games, none of which were made by Game Freak, have been a breath of fresh air over the years. I can't think of anyone I know who doesn't have a fondness for Pokemon Stadium or Pokemon Snap. From what I've heard, the Pokemon Ranger and Mystery Dungeon games were quite a blast to play, and the continued success of the Pokemon trading card game speaks for itself really. Unfortunately, we never got newer, up-to-date versions of some of these games. Pokemon Snap 2 was one of those games I always hear people wishing had been made. Personally, I think the Pokemon Company dropped the ball big time by never creating a Zoo Tycoon style game. With so many critters from unique habitats and regions, it would have made a freaking amazing game. Heck, if they finally upscaled the sizes of many Pokemon, they could go ham and produce a Monster Hunter style game if they dared to appeal to their continually aging player base. I know the franchise is primarily aimed at kids and teenagers, but honestly, not making something for the older fans that are the reason Pokemon even got as big as it is just daft to me. Like I said, I grew up with Pokemon, but unfortunately, Pokemon didn't exactly grow up with me. All my various complaints about the mainline series, the show, the movies, and the spin-offs aside, this is probably my biggest gripe with this and many other series. I loved Pokemon, and to an extent I still do, but I find myself struggling to enjoy it with each new generation. It is to be expected that the older content is not as appealing after all these years, and with the primary demographic being younglings, it would be unrealistic to expect to still enjoy new content as much as I used to. Yet I still desire something from the franchise that I can really sink my teeth into as an adult. I mean, it is a franchise based around making animals fight each other, for crying out loud. How much damage could possibly be caused by making a series of games for the older crowd? There is virtually nothing to lose and everything to gain, really. Gloves off, nostalgia goggles discarded, all cards on the table. I consider this to be one of the biggest failings of many brands. They want to stay family friendly? That sounds like cowardice to me. Fear of angering the Karen conglomerate. Harry Potter didn't shy away from getting dark and gritty, so why should Pokemon? The franchise already survived the wave of kids starting dogfights in an attempt to imitate the games in real life back in the early 2000s and late 90s. What could having a few games of a mature tone honestly prompt that is worse than that? Heck, Pokemon already has a lot of subtle and not so subtle dark elements strewn throughout its lore. In the Pokemon Adventure manga, an Arbok gets straight up cut in half too. But I digress again. This is, as most of what I've said so far, a purely subjective matter. After all, it is clear that regardless of how much Pokemon as a franchise does or does not innovate, it will retain its position as the most profitable franchise in existence. And for good reason. Don't fix what ain't broke, right? Still, a version of the mainline games that cuts to crap and embraces the darker elements, doesn't hold your hand, and presents a grittier world and story would be awesome, and likely sell like hotcakes purely by virtue of being a Pokemon game. If you couldn't tell by now, I've grown from a Pokemon-loving kid to a jaded adult who really just wishes he could still enjoy things as much as he used to. I'm not a kid anymore, and push come to shove, this franchise is for kids. I'm not saying that adults can't enjoy it. Adults do, I presume, make up a significant amount of the fan base. Many people even made a career out of YouTube using only Pokemon-focused content, such as Birdkeeper Toby and Loxton of Channel Noggin. Even I've recently decided to pick up my copy of Pokemon Black again to do a Nuzlocke run after enjoying seeing other people's Nuzlocke stories. That doesn't change the fact that, for me, the wonder and amazement that Pokemon originally held just isn't as strong as it used to be. I do appreciate things that are added, like regional variants of existing Pokemon, additional evolutions for Eevee, and more Pokemon with split evolution lines. But those just aren't enough to bring the magic back. They can't hold up a tired and outdated formula. And I'm not sure how much longer I can keep hoping for it to all get better than it is. Wow, that was a rant and a half. Assuming my overwhelming negativity or the sheer length of this video didn't drive you away and you're still listening, then I can only say that I hope you enjoyed it. If you're a fan of Pokemon and want to see more Pokemon-related content, let me know in the comments below. I would also recommend checking out YouTubers Birdkeeper Toby and Loxton. I might not be a huge fan of Pokemon anymore, but even I still enjoy their videos from time to time. If you'd like to hear me rant about my thoughts and views on other topics, then certainly drop some lines in the comments below, and subscribe. Plus, any and all other feedback is appreciated. If you'd like to support my dumb, crazy, cynical ass, then you can drop some spare change into my tip jar over on Patreon, or come join me and other fans on my Discord server. Links to all this and more in the description below. And until next time, cheers.